Hello, my friends. Quick one today from the corner of my room. Sorry about the glare of my glasses. That's because I'm at my computer chair. So I've obviously got both my monitors there so I can do some podcast work. But I was working some scripts through, and obviously there's been a big trend recently on social media and YouTube, especially, for certain words to become almost taboo. Like, you can't say certain words because of how it'll impact the algorithm, and your stuff won't go anywhere if you say certain words. And some of those words make sense, when you're saying things like, um, when you're talking about um, like mental health, and you're talking about things like suicide or death or murder, right, and what have you. And I get why these things get limited, but it also becomes a thing when you're having it with political discussions as well, like when you're having like people talking about Nazis and fascism, and or even things like Israel and what's happening in Palestine and things like that. And I my politics are quite integral to me, and my opinions on politics inform a lot of what I do and a lot of the media that I watch. And so I tend to cover these things when talking on my podcast. And to the point that I actually recorded a segment 2 days ago for an upcoming episode. It's out in like a week, and next week it'll be out, which is talking about the MCU. And I've discussed in there the current situation between Israel and Palestine and the genocide that Israel is undertaking in Gaza. And I've been very, very open about that. And it's one of those I know some people would not be. Some people really would not be. And this was brought to a head on a video I saw on Monday, so earlier this week, from Stephanie Sterling, YouTuber I've been following for a long time, on their show, The Jimquisition. And as part of this week's Jimquisition, they spoke about seeing this on YouTube and seeing a video discussing the Holocaust, of all things, while using terms to get around the censorship things with the algorithm, like talking about the Holocaust of the Jews without mentioning the word Nazi, without mentioning the word kill, using the euphemism unaliving, which is horrible. It's a horrible word. Now, I have plenty of episodes on my podcast where I've discussed topics like this in the media that I've watched. And, obviously I've got others where I don't talk about such dark topics, but, I discuss a lot of things with superheroes and comic books, and characters die and they fight actual evil supervillains, and occasionally they do fight Nazis. And, when I'm talking about things like Star Trek as well, that, these allegories to real world incidents and racism and warfare, they are things that happen and things that I discuss because they need to be discussed for the points I'm trying to make in what I'm talking about. And that's even before I get to some of the more obvious satirical things like Warhammer, for example. And I just want to make this promise up front that, I'm not monetized on YouTube at the minute. I'm not monetized on Spotify. I'm not monetized anywhere. I've got plenty of content that I could be monetized for. I don't have the viewership numbers. And part of the reasons, like, if these things don't do well in the algorithm, talking about these things is probably why I don't have the viewership numbers. But also, I don't want to get the viewership by sacrificing the quality of my content. So I'm not going to use any of these silly words and loopholes and things like that to get around the algorithm. If I'm talking about a political situation, I'm going to talk about it. If I'm talking about an allegory for a real world situation, I'm going to talk about the real world situation. If I talk about a character dying or going through other significant trauma, and, talking about things like rape, for example, which does happen in superhero comics and in sci-fi and in a whole load of other things, You know, it's one of the most horrible things that can happen to another human being. And it does occasionally happen in stories like that as used as a way of motivating characters. So I will talk about it. I will put trigger warnings on when I do. You know, if this happens in the content that I'm talking about, I'll put trigger warnings. Several of my episodes have trigger warnings on. But I'm not going to avoid talking about it. And I don't think we should. I don't think we should allow the algorithms and YouTube and Facebook and TikTok and all the rest of them to change our way of speaking because they've decided it's not okay. Especially because, you know, the people who are more than willing to tolerate that are usually Americans on the right wing who value free speech so much as well. Can we point that out? The hypocrisy there. These are the people who really value free speech. Free speech means so much to them. Provided it's them being racist or homophobic or transphobic, not actually being able to use the words to describe Nazis or murder or genocide or rape or the Holocaust in the appropriate terms. You know, when it's those words being censored, they're really quiet.